Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bhakti Fundamentals. Today, we will discuss the secret ingredient needed for success in spiritual life. As we have discussed in previous sessions, Bhakti Yoga is the path of reconnecting with the Supreme, Kṛṣṇa, through loving devotional service rendered to the Supreme. We'll review a bit more momentarily, but the means to success on this path of bhakti is actually quite simple. It involves cultivating fixed determination, or what Kṛṣṇa calls single-minded intelligence in the Gītā. But before we can become fixedly determined, we must know what we are determined to achieve. In other words, we first need a clearly defined spiritual goal. Goals are important because they give us a target to aim for. If we don't know where we're going, we cannot know whether we're making progress toward our goal. There is a saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. It is like getting into a car without choosing a destination. If there's no destination, no turn can be called a wrong turn. The same is true in spiritual life. If we have no clearly defined goal, then almost anything that feels uplifting can be called spiritual. Spirituality then becomes whatever we want it to be in that case, instead of what it actually is. If the destination is unclear, the process for reaching it will also be unclear. Fortunately, the goal of Bhakti Yoga is not vague. Kṛṣṇa clearly explains it in the text of the Bhagavad-gītā. The ultimate goal of Bhakti Yoga is to revive our eternal relationship with Kṛṣṇa through loving devotional service, or bhakti. The word yoga means to link or reconnect. Bhakti Yoga is the process of reconnecting with Kṛṣṇa through our thoughts, words, activities, and daily spiritual practices, through our whole life ultimately. Throughout the Gītā, Kṛṣṇa makes this spiritual goal very clear, and he re-emphasizes it in the closing verses of the text. In chapter 18, Kṛṣṇa says, "In all activities, just depend upon me and work always under my protection. In such devotional service, be fully conscious of me." 2 verses later, he says, "If you do not act according to my direction and do not fight," addressing Arjuna here, "then you will be falsely directed. By your nature, you will have to be engaged in warfare." And a few verses later, "Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend." Kṛṣṇa explains here that Arjuna cannot simply avoid action. Because Arjuna is a warrior by nature, he will act in that capacity one way or another. The real question is whether Arjuna will act for his own purposes or in devotional service to Kṛṣṇa. In that final verse on screen, we learn that Kṛṣṇa wants Arjuna to become his devotee, to perform his duty in relationship with him, the Supreme. In other words, Arjuna will still fight in the battle of Kurukshetra, but on behalf of the Supreme, as a service rendered to Kṛṣṇa. Recall that Arjuna is confronting rulers who have acted unjustly, seized the kingdom, and repeatedly rejected peaceful solutions. Under Kṛṣṇa's direct instruction, Arjuna will now fight as an act of devotional service to oppose injustice and restore righteous leadership and peace. Outwardly, Arjuna may appear to be engaged in battle like any other soldier, but his purpose and consciousness are entirely different. He is not acting out of personal ambition, hatred, or revenge. Rather, he is acting on Kṛṣṇa's behalf. And because Kṛṣṇa is the well-wishing father of all living beings, acting for his satisfaction ultimately benefits everyone. And Kṛṣṇa wants us to undergo the same transformation of consciousness that Arjuna undergoes. We may not change all our outward activities, but when we start practicing Bhakti Yoga, we change the purpose for which we perform them. Instead of living only for temporary material goals, we learn to connect our activities and ultimately our whole lives, to Kṛṣṇa. And now that this spiritual goal is clear, we can understand what fixed determination actually means. Simply put, in Bhakti Yoga, fixed determination means deciding, my ultimate goal in life is to awaken my relationship with Kṛṣṇa, and I will continue moving toward that goal no matter what. Now, why is cultivating this determination so important? Because life in this material world is difficult, and something will always seem to get in the way of our spiritual practices otherwise. We may lose a job, develop a health problem, experience financial burden, find that our children or other family members require more of our time, etc. Even when our external circumstances are good, our own enthusiasm in the beginning of practicing spiritual life will rise and fall until we have advanced to a certain level of practice. Our day-to-day circumstances may change, but our decision to forge ahead with our spiritual practices never changes when we have cultivated this necessary ingredient of fixed determination. Now, our main spiritual practice in Bhakti Yoga is chanting a fixed number of rounds of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra every day. However, interestingly, it is often the practice people struggle most to maintain consistently in bhakti. But just as we do not stop eating or sleeping because our days become busy, we should not neglect the spiritual nourishment that we receive from chanting. Kṛṣṇa is all pure, and because he is absolute, there is no difference between Kṛṣṇa and his name. Therefore, when we chant the Maha Mantra, which is comprised of his names, we come directly into contact with Kṛṣṇa. That contact gradually cleanses our consciousness of material desires and conditioning and awakens our natural spiritual awareness. We begin to understand that we are not our temporary material bodies, but eternal spiritual beings, and that our source is the Supreme. In this way, chanting helps us see ourselves, others, and everything in our lives in relationship with the Supreme. Thus, to succeed in Bhakti Yoga, we simply must find a way to complete our daily chanting of his names. In addition to chanting, fixed determination in Bhakti Yoga means continuing to associate with others on the spiritual path and regularly reading and hearing about Kṛṣṇa from sacred texts such as the Bhagavad-gītā. Bhakti Yoga actually includes 9 principal processes of devotional service, including hearing about Kṛṣṇa, chanting his names, remembering him, praying to him, etc. As we progress, we can gradually bring more and more of those 9 processes into our lives. It's important to remember, however, that chanting and associating with devotees are especially helpful in keeping us steady in our bhakti practice. If life ever feels overwhelming, we might simplify our practice for a time, but we should not abandon these 2 essential sources of spiritual strength. Altogether, all of our Bhakti Yoga practices are meant to strengthen our determination to reach our ultimate spiritual goal. And this brings us to a very helpful verse from the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā. Verse 2.41, Kṛṣṇa says, "Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, Arjuna, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched." Notice that in this verse, Kṛṣṇa brings the goal and determination to reach the goal together. Their aim is one, they know the destination, and they are resolute in purpose. They are determined to reach it. This is the formula given by the Supreme himself. First, we understand the goal of Bhakti Yoga. Then we arrange our lives so that we continue moving toward it. Kṛṣṇa then shows us the opposite. He says that the intelligence of those who are not resolute is many-branched. Instead of moving steadily toward one ultimate goal, their attention is divided among many competing desires. Someone of many branch determination may want to grow closer to Kṛṣṇa one day, but the next day they allow something else to take priority. Such a person may know the goal of life, but if they do not have fixed determination, competing priorities will prevent them from actually reaching their spiritual goal. The image of branches is very helpful. Think of a tree with branches spreading out in many different directions. Now imagine taking those same branches and lining them up so that they all extend in one direction, straight upward. The tree would reach much higher. In the same way, we progress much further in spiritual life when our thoughts, choices, and daily practices are all aligned with our spiritual goal. But if we allow our attention to be constantly pulled in different directions, our efforts and activities become scattered and materially driven again. We will always have many responsibilities in life. The art of Bhakti Yoga is finding a way to connect them all to the Supreme. A person with fixed determination in spiritual life, like anyone else, may have a job, children, health concerns, bills, and many other responsibilities. But those responsibilities do not replace their spiritual goal. Instead, that person asks, how can I fulfill my duties while continuing to remember and serve Kṛṣṇa? In fact, we can perform all our daily activities for Kṛṣṇa and offer the results of them to him. This purifies our work and connects it to Kṛṣṇa, who is ultimately the source of our ability to act anyway. This is known as spiritual dovetailing, or harmonizing our lives with the Supreme. Of course, we cannot make a harmful activity spiritual simply by calling it an offering to Kṛṣṇa. Activities in the mode of ignorance, such as meat eating and intoxication, cannot be offered to him and must gradually be given up. We can, however, prepare vegetarian food with love and offer it to Kṛṣṇa before eating. In fact, Kṛṣṇa suggests that we do so in the 9th chapter of the Gītā. And we learn in the Gītā that Kṛṣṇa accepts the devotion with which our food is offered to him. Kṛṣṇa says in chapter 9, verse 26, "If one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, I will accept it." When we lovingly offer our vegetarian food to Kṛṣṇa before eating it ourselves, the food becomes spiritually purified. It becomes prasadam, a Sanskrit word meaning mercy. In this way, even the ordinary act of eating can help us make spiritual advancement. This principle of offering can extend to the other suitable activities that we perform throughout the day: working, studying, caring for our children, etc. As Kṛṣṇa explains in the following verse, chapter 9, verse 27, "Whatever you do, do that as an offering to me." All this is to say that when our spiritual goal is clear, to uncover our dormant love for the Supreme and revive our eternal relationship with him, it helps us orient everything in our lives in the proper spiritual direction. We will always have many activities and responsibilities, but they can all support our spiritual goal when we connect them with Kṛṣṇa. Instead of allowing different desires to pull us in different directions to be successful in spiritual life, we must somehow organize our lives around one ultimate goal: awakening our love for Kṛṣṇa. So let us make a commitment today that no matter what happens in my life, I will continue my spiritual practices and keep moving toward Kṛṣṇa. Then, let us hold ourselves accountable to that commitment. We will never regret doing so, because every sincere effort that we make in Bhakti Yoga brings us closer to Kṛṣṇa, and no spiritual effort is ever lost. So that's all we have for today on the topic of cultivating single-minded determination in spiritual life. Let us know what you thought of this topic, and if you have any questions that we might answer in a future session. In the meantime, thank you for listening today, and we'll see you next time on Bhakti Fundamentals.